Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review of a long-lost, vintage, discontinued fragrance that, quite frankly, goes for silly money on eBay. There are bottles of this people are trying to sell for $300, $400, $500. Good luck to you. I don't think it's worth more than about $100, $150 tops. There are some bottles in the $100 to $200 range, which are more reasonable. But, you know, with eBay, it's everyone thinks they're sitting on a lottery ticket. Why stop at 500? Stick it up there for 1,000. This is Escada's Magnetism for men. And you can see, well, I can because the window's open, and I can see right through this bottle that my juice level is right about here. And I wore this yesterday as my scent of the day. I'm wearing it again today as my scent of the day. It is the end of January here in Texas. Perfect weather for this type of fragrance. And this is a funny one, okay? Because Escada is a house that used to have some really good masculine fragrances. They are all discontinued. They discontinued their entire masculine line just to focus on the women's fragrance, which I have no idea why, because some of their men's fragrances were pretty damn good. I've done a review, actually it was a comparison video between the Eau de Toilette of Escada Pour Homme from the early 90s, 93, I believe, 94. This is my favorite Escada by far. The most classy, the most traditional. You know, if you like things like Guerlain's Heritage, Zeno by Davidoff, which is also made by Michel Almerac, and also uses a pretty prominent vanilla, which is also used in Magnetism, by the way. If you like the way Michel Almerac uses vanilla and things like Zeno, I would highly recommend you to check this one out. And probably my least favorite Escada is this little bad boy. This is called Sentiment Pour Homme, which is just kind of a fresh, peppery thing for the heat. I don't really care for it as much. Casual Friday is the final vintage Escada on my list that I want to review. And this is, to me, like a much more dressed up version of Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Male. And it's interesting because some people consider to be Escada a brand that many folks wore to clubbing. Like, this is like a clubbing fragrance, I heard some people say. And I can kind of see where they're coming from, but I wore this to the office yesterday, and it worked brilliantly for me. And here's the thing. I think in 2004, when this came out, that this fragrance DNA, this profile, if you will, is not as unique as it is today in 2024. So we're 20 years old now, 20th anniversary of Escada Magnetism for men. And I think what has ended up happening in those last, let's say, 10 to 20 years is the oud craze. So obviously early on, 2007, Tom Ford's, well, by this point, M7 had already come out for YSL, but it never caught fire. No one really cared about M7. It hit discounters and got discontinued very quickly. But then when Tom Ford put out Oud Wood, everything changed. And everyone who was anyone needed an oud fragrance. And the reason I'm bringing it up, this doesn't have oud in it, but it does have a note of saffron. And it's funny because the saffron in here, in 2024, it smells unique because every time you smell saffron now in a fragrance, it's a rose oud saffron, right? It's just like, or musk rose oud saffron. People are used to that combination. They are used to smelling saffron in conjunction with oud. They're less used to smelling saffron on its own, without oud. So the note listing on this is basically, which I guess I should have had it ready. It is saffron, Tolu balsam, amber, cedar, musk, pepper tree, which I've heard is an aphrodisiac, saffron, sandalwood, vanilla, and leather. Okay, so that's basically the note listing. It's considered a spicy, sweet, woody, oriental style fragrance created by Michel Almerac, who I have a ton of respect for his work. He's created some amazing fragrances in the past. He has done Yop Homme with Pierre Bourdon. I mentioned Davidoff Zeno. He did the original Gucci Pour Homme, Bentley for Men Absolute. He then started his own brand, which I think Parle-moi de Parfums. Star Walker by Mont Blanc, which is discontinued. Minotaur by Paloma Picasso. The list goes on and on and on. Fire Island by Bond Number 9. Queer Amethyst by Giorgio Armani. He's done a ton of stuff, right? And so I have a lot of respect for Michel Almerac and his work. But one thing that I will say about that is that I really think when you first spray this early on, okay, the very first thing that you're going to get is this ambery, inky, fizzy grape cola vibe. And if you go watch old reviews, I think Mark from the Robes 08 channel has a review of this from like 2008 or something, 2009, some early on in FragCon, let's say, okay? And 2008, 2009, he was talking about Escada Magnetism for men, and he mentioned that it's doesn't feel as unique, that it's more of just a clubbing fragrance and a one-trick pony. And I think that this has actually aged almost like a fine wine, right? Because yes, it's a designer. Yes, it smells like a designer, but this combination of notes that's come together, I don't think I've ever smelled anything that's like Escada Magnetism for Men. There's nothing in my collection that has this Escada Magnetism for Men DNA. There's nothing I've come across over the years that smells exactly like this. There's some stuff that have come close, but it's interesting because I think that saffron in the opening, mixed with the resins, mixed with the woods and all the other things that end up coming to your nose, there's this weird inky quality to the fragrance, okay? And Manly Sense Keith, who is a subscriber of the channel, you'll see him in the comments. He left a beautiful review on Parfumo talking about this fountain pen inkiness. And it's a great way to describe it because even though this is a designer, it's not an easy description. This is not an easy review for me to do. The reality is that this has taken me a long time to wear and wrap my head around and be able to talk about like this. And so that saffron in the opening, people talk about these strange notes in Escada Magnetism. There are some hilarious reviews. If you go online, go to Fragrantica, go to some of the different sites, look at what some of the people say, look at the comments in some of the YouTube videos. I've heard people say that this smells like a strange shag carpet from the 70s. I've heard people say that it smells like parrot feathers in a zoo, in a pet store. What does parrot feathers smell like? I have no idea, but just imagine this extremely strange sort of opening to some. Now, to me, I don't think it smells extremely strange, but it is an outrageous ambery, inky, fizzy grape cola vibe. And if you know me, you know I am a huge fan of fragrances that have that fizzy cola-like feeling. One of my favorites, which I've done a comparison video on the channel, is Roja's Creation E. This is a brilliant sort of fizzy cola, sort of cherry Pepsi feeling to me. And you get a little bit of that cola feel in Escada Magnetism, but instead of cherry Pepsi, it comes across as a little bit like grape soda. And they really nailed the color of this. There was a couple bottles that some people mentioned. Alien Man by Thierry Mugler is one bottle that kind of looks very similar to this. But this sort of dark purple color really reminds you, gives you a good idea of the fragrance. There is a very prominent note of Tolu balsam in here. Pretty amazing note of Tolu balsam, actually, for a designer. Tolu balsam is a balsam that is actually, I think, fairly expensive to use. I don't think it's a cheap ingredient. You see it a lot in niche perfumery nowadays, but it has this very rich, deep, smooth, slightly bitter feeling to the ambery undertone. It's balsamic in nature, of course, it's a balsam. And, you know, it has this intense, but also smooth undertone of like this designer vanilla. And if you've been sniffing niche fragrances for the last decade or so, you may come across this and go, you know what, this is way too designer for me. If you pay $500 for this on eBay, first of all, you're sick if you do that. Do not pay. Don't even pay $200 or $300. Don't reward that behavior. Obviously, they're putting it up hoping somebody buys it. I completely understand, but I don't think it's worth that because it does have this undertone of a designer feel. Now, some people will smell that and they're going to say it's not worth it. It's not worth the money. It's not this. It's not that. It's overrated. This is probably my second favorite Escada masculine fragrance behind my all-time favorite, which is Escada Pour Homme. But Escada Pour Homme, like I said, has that old school late 80s, early 90s amber fougere, if you will, is what I've ended up calling that category. That Guerlain heritage, like I talked about earlier. There is that DNA in Escada Pour Homme, but imagine it more boozy, so like a boozy quality. So it's interesting. This doesn't have a boozy quality, but I could totally see somebody mixing in some rum or something within the grape soda feel of Escada Magnetism, right? There is definitely that fizzy grape inky soda feel with that undertone of smooth designer vanilla, okay? And if you like the way Michel Amarac uses vanilla in his other creations, I would urge you to try to check this one out if you can. I know it's hard to find, but if you find a decent deal, it's worth grabbing. If you're into, if you can appreciate and wear fragrances from lots of different genres like I can. Like I can appreciate niche. I can appreciate ouds. I can appreciate designers. I can appreciate cheapies, expensive fragrances. I go all over the place, right? There is not one part of the fragrance area that I'll stay away from. I would, you know, when this first came out, I think it was like 25 to 50 bucks. You could probably find bottles somewhere in that $20 to $50 range, okay? And now they're hundreds, but the scent profile is going to be the same. Obviously it's harder to find. It's more, it's not as ubiquitous now. People may have been wearing it a lot more when bottles were readily available. But that sort of spicy, sweet, very interesting cola vibe keeps me coming back to this fragrance. I absolutely love it. And it is, you know, going back to the Tolu balsam and the materials in this name, it's interesting because I made some notes on Tolu balsam, and Tolu balsam gets its name from the native pre-Columbian people that used to be inhabitants of Tolu, which was a small town in northern Colombia. So the Tolus were supposedly the first people reported in the Spanish chronicles to actually use Tolu balsam. So I don't know, they would like tap the tree and let the balsam come out. And I did make some notes here on the on Tolu balsam. Let's see if I can find them real quick. So Tolu balsam is in the same realm as Peru balsam, which interestingly enough, the material immediately came from Europe at first, not Peru, but it was a little bit invasive and apparently took over the area, and so hence the name Peru balsam. So Tolu balsam talked about the native Colombian people who used to live in the northern parts of Colombia, and so Tolu balsam is tapped from the tree trunk through incisions in the bark, trickling yellow-brown, semi-fluid, or near-solid material in thick drops that are collected. Remember I said frankincense is sometimes called teardrops when they come off of the tree. Similar with drops with the Tolu balsam. And it's supposed to have this undertone of cinnamon and vanilla. Very soft, very balsamic, and it can sometimes also give off, outside of that warming vanillic-like feel, it can sometimes give off slight floral aspects to this. So even though if you look at the note listing, you'll notice that there's no traditional floral notes, okay? Sometimes you will get a little bit of a floral vibe that comes and goes, and maybe that's why some men consider this to be too feminine. And so it's interesting because the brand actually refers to the combination. So in the brand, here's what the brand says about the fragrance, okay? It says, after Magnetism for women, Escada has launched a male version of the fragrance. The perfume was created by master perfumer for men's fragrance, Michel Almarac, in 2004. The fragrance is very sensual. It's dark. Its intense dark aroma includes woody, spicy, and balsamic notes. Pepper and saffron reveal their hot and spicy temperament from the beginning. The heart is composed of very masculine and elegant woodsy notes of sandalwood and cedar. The sharp leather notes are contrasting the warm and balsamic oriental base of Tolu balsam, amber, musk, and vanilla. So you might have missed that, but in the top they mentioned that the brand calls it hot and spicy temperament. Okay, so hot and spicy temperament created by saffron and peppery notes in the top. And so I think that's where all of those weird analogies really come from. That strange mixture of saffron and pepper, along with the undertone of the ambers, because this is technically considered an amber woody fragrance, right? Not amber woods, but you could call it like an ambery woody fragrance. It has ambers and it has woods, not traditional amber woods that are going to put you off. I mean, there might be some, but there's nothing in here that really jumps out to me other than the fact that I would say that Escada Magnetism dries down to that vanillic-like feel. Okay, it dries down to an amber. It's obviously an amber, but it's not an amber wood. I think the biggest turnoff maybe for somebody is the designer-like feel of the fragrance. Escada Magnetism just feels like a designer. That's the best way I can describe it. I was trying to think of some way to describe the way it makes me feel when I wear it. If you have experience with designers from the past, you're gonna lump this directly in with the designers. There's no doubt about it. The fact that people are trying to sell this for $300-400 is nuts. It's absolutely crazy to me. But I will say this. if you think about the fragrance sort of in this, think about it like this, okay? There's a drink called dandelion and burdock. So this comes from Rich Mitch because he lives in England. I had to look it up because we don't have dandelion and burdock drink in America, okay? But dandelion and burdock is a drink that is actually a very intriguing descriptor for Escada Magnetism. So just imagine this herbal, purple Dimetapp colored smell, okay? Because it really does smell like the bottle color. So imagine this Dimetapp colored liquid smell that is inky in complexion, slightly powdery, vanillic, and into the dry down, more and more of that leather and vanilla begins to come out. So the vanilla, along with the smooth balsams and resins, kind of come forward, right? And I think that smooth balsamic vanillic dry down is really what gives it its designer tilt. Okay, it's really what makes it feel like a designer. And so I'm not going to call this a Vintage Hall of Fame review because I don't think this fragrance is good enough to get into the Vintage Hall of Fame fragrances. It's not good enough to get in with the Antaises and the Bellamy's and the Coroses and all that stuff that will be, if I have not done a Vintage Hall of Fame review on those, I will, right? This fragrance is not good enough to get into the halls of that level to me. However, as far as someone who likes the collector side of this hobby and collecting fragrances, this is a very intriguing piece because like I said, I wore it to work yesterday, worked beautifully. And I'm wearing it today, working from home today, but it's probably going to be high 60s, almost 70 degrees here. It's like a spring day, even though it's January. Works beautifully. I probably wouldn't wear this in the high heat of summer because of the ambery, balsamic aspects of it. And the leather, I feel like the leather tends to come out a little bit more in the heat. But other than that, I think you could wear this 3 seasons out of the year, let's call it, with no problems. And that saffron, strange, peppery sort of opening keeps me interested. It does. Even though the dry down is very designer-like, I think this is a unique creation. And, you know, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with wearing a designer fragrance like this. This is actually the kind of designer fragrance that I really wish modern designers today in 2024 were still making. They should take notes from what was going on 20 years ago. I mean, 2004 was not that long ago, at least to me, at least in the perfume world in 2004. Obviously, a lot has changed since then, but over the last 20 years, there's been a ton of fragrances that I absolutely love wearing. And, you know, for me, this is an example. I think if the fragrance houses want to take a look at something that can be made without using extremely expensive ingredients and still be unique and sell, I think this would sell today, in my opinion. I think this would sell today. I think this would sell today. I think that if, you know, the biggest maybe beef that you could level towards something like Escada Magnetism is that it's synthetic, okay? The fragrance feels synthetic, and it does. It absolutely does feel synthetic. Maybe that's the designer side of it I was trying to explain. There is definitely a synthetic feel to the composition, but it's being produced by master perfumer Michel Almerac, right? So, I mean, the guy knows what he's doing. And for all of these fragrance houses nowadays that are trying to maximize profit, they want to use the cheapest ingredients possible. They want to charge as much money as possible. I think that this could easily be on the market, easily, for 150 bucks, okay? That's about what Dior Sauvage sells nowadays. Put 100 mils, 150 bucks, 75 mils, 75 bucks, or whatever it is, and this would sell. I'm telling you, this would sell. Escada should definitely bring this back. You know, I think there's a market for this type of perfume is kind of where I'm going with this. I think that, you know, the designer fragrance world for people like me feels dead, but this proves it doesn't have to be dead. It's just the stuff that's coming out is so, it's so unimaginative. You know, it's like music and movies nowadays. They just do the same thing over and over again. You know, Fast and the Furious number 25. Go get your tickets and see what Vin Diesel's doing now. You know, it's just kind of one of those things where there needs to be some sort of spark of imagination back into the designer fragrance game. And this is the type of thing that I think can make all parties happy. It can make the people making the scents happy, because they're not, I don't think this is a fragrance composition with a ton of expensive natural ingredients or anything like that. Maybe the saffron is the most expensive thing. Saffron is a very expensive material. Maybe the saffron between 2004 and 2024 has gone up in price a lot. But outside of that saffron and the Tolu balsam, I can't think of, I know they're not using real sandalwood or anything like that. And so they already have the mold of the bottle. They could just bring this bottle back. You know, it's just kind of one of those things for me. I think that Escada can be kind of like a case study in cheap designer fragrances that are done better than the shit that they're pumping out today. I hate the stuff they're putting out nowadays. Eros and some of those Prada designers are just absolutely disgusting. And you know, so this can be kind of like a case study in bringing back good designer perfume where all parties would be happy. Plus, I think the folks who are willing to pay $400 or $500, or I don't think there's anyone buying those bottles at that price, but let's say you can talk them down to whatever it is, $250 for 100 mils. Having this back on the market at $150, let's say, I think would be worthwhile. So anyways, that's my take on it. It is not a vintage Hall of Fame review, but let's call it a discontinued fragrance review. So if you have experience with Escada Magnetism, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you like that cola kind of grape vibe, I'd love to hear if you're also one of the folks that love cola openings. I feel like the cola feel should be more prominent in more fragrances. It should be sort of marketed more, let's say. I feel like some of these fragrances that have these very strange, interesting cola openings, it's like a byproduct, you know, instead of really being focused on. So anyways, let me know what you think of Escada Magnetism for men. Let me know what you think of Escada just getting rid of all of their designer fragrances for men, which is just crazy. I think they need to bring some of these masculine fragrances back. And let me know what you think about the state of the designer fragrance game in general. I think it's an absolute shambles, but that's just my 2 cents. So anyways, let me know what your thoughts on this little discontinued beauty is. So cheers, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.